I'm here in Adobe Illustrator. I've got a document, um, and the I have a drawing of a guy in the gigantic style that I drew here, and I have basically um, the pages that I made on the Pathfinder. So I'm going to just real quickly show you um, the shape modes here. That's these top ones. So let's say I have a shape here. I'm going to get a rounded rectangle tool, and that's the very first thing you notice. Well, hey, didn't the letter M used to be um, the rectangle tool, and wasn't there a square corner rectangle tool? That's a new change for CC 2020. Let me go ahead and give this a stroke, and I'll make that like a 12-point stroke or more. Okay, it'll be a 21-point stroke. Okay, so in 2020, you'll notice this looks very much, we used to be able to draw a regular square cornered rectangle. You'll see on the rectangle I've created, there's the center point right here, and then there's little radius points right here on all four corners. If I grab that radius point and pull in, you'll see that it'll make a more or less round radius. It'll decrease or increase the radius. If I pull this all the way to the edge, I have a square rectangle. So it was a little bit of a redundancy that Adobe recognized to be able to have both a rounded rectangle tool and a rectangle tool. It used to be that we only had, that the two tools were very different, but over the last couple of years, they introduced these radius points, and so it made it to where it was redundant. So I'm gonna pick that, and I'm going to click on the same spot. There's a star tool here. So I'm gonna make a star within that. I'll hold Command and click off on the white, so that's no longer selected. And I'm gonna make the star have a different color fill, and I'll just flip the fill and the stroke, and I'll go with a different fill color too. So I've got a blue fill and a purple stroke star, and that's what I'm going to draw. So I'll come right here. Notice I'm using Smart Guides here. When it says center there, if you see the pink type that says center, that means it's in the center of this object. Doesn't have to be for this demo sake, but I'm just showing you that. I'm gonna hold Option and drag out, and you notice my star is going all sorts of different directions. If I hold Shift, it will constrain it to a straight up and down star. I'm gonna go beyond the edge of that. And so right now I only have one object selected. So the Pathfinder tool is not gonna do much for me. And where is the Pathfinder tool? Where you find the Pathfinder tool in Window, Pathfinder. And so for me, the Pathfinder tool always lives down here in the lower left-hand corner. I'm gonna move it like right here though, just so you can see it. So for the Pathfinder tool to work, you have to have two objects selected. This one selected. I'm holding the Command key, which if you look at my mouse, you see what happens. I'm going from the star tool to a selection tool. But you notice in the toolbar here, it doesn't change tools. I can always click off on the pasteboard here or an area where nothing's selected to deselect, or I can select and then hold Shift to select more than one object. Now I have both of these shapes selected. And so I'm gonna go into the shape modes of the Pathfinder tool. This first one's called Unite. As I click that, see what happens? It turned it into one combined shape. If I go to Command Y, which is View Outline, that key command didn't seem to work. View Outline, you see what happens. It becomes one shape. Command Z, you see it's two different vector shapes. And then when I do Unite here, it turns into one shape. So I'll undo that again. So that's the unite. And again, I'll go back to preview mode. So that's this one right here. Two shapes, you have this shape and this shape, you unite them. Then the next one is minus front. It's right here, they're both selected. I'll click this one. You see what it did? It cut this section here out. And so when you look at the vector, it looks like that. And so I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different shapes and a hole punched out where that star was. I'm going to undo that. The next one is intersect, and it's not going to be as exciting of a result on this one, but I'll go ahead and click it. And you see it basically cropped where that rectangle was. And then lastly, exclude. Let's see what that does. And that cut it into different shapes here. You see I can take those with the group selection tool and pull those apart. So those are basically this top row, they're all shape builder tools. Okay, then there's Pathfinder tools. So the two I use most often are the Unite tool and the Divide tool. The Divide tool's a really nice one. I'm going to move my Pathfinder tool to, oh, I just noticed I placed both shape modes and shape modes on my document here. I didn't do the Pathfinders, so I didn't notice that. But I'll just show you what the Pathfinder modes are. They're right here. The first one is divide. I click that, and what that does, that's a really handy one because a lot of times you want to just cut things into separate shapes. So everywhere the lines intersect, you'll see that it cuts those into shapes. So that's a pretty handy tool. I use it all the time. Let me undo, undo, undo. We're back to shape. That's Pathfinder tool. Trim, it's going to, again, divide them into separate shapes. And the star didn't get affected because it was the top shape. I'm going to do that same thing, but I'm going to move the star to the back. And I did that with a key command, but the key command I did was object, arrange, send to back, shift command left bracket. So it's all the way in the back, the star. So let's see what happens with the trim with the star in the back. And you see what happens. The top object doesn't get affected. The bottom object gets trimmed. So that's that Pathfinder tool. Undo. Next one here is merge. And it, in this instance, gives you basically the same exact result. These tools will do different things based on what your objects are. I'll try merge here, and you see it, the top object doesn't really get affected. So in this instance, it did really not much different than the divide would do. Let me undo that. Okay, and then notice when I did that, notice my stroke here. Look what happens on the shape here in the back, the rectangle. When I click merge, the stroke disappeared on both of those. Well, let's say you wanted to keep that stroke. I'll show you how to do that as soon as I finish these. Crop, you see the other shape here, it got rid of those, although they're still vector for, so basically it cropped, but it's very similar to what divide does in that instance. And then there's outline, and that in this instance again did the exact same thing. Not exactly the same thing, because you see I don't have a closed path here, but it's doing basically lines for everything. I don't know if you can see that well. Okay, and then the last one is minus back. So it's just going to basically take this back shape out. Um, so those are all the pathfinders and shape builders. So what if I want to see these lines? Here's something that's not the Pathfinder, but it's super handy and I use it all the time. If you go to Object, you'll see there's Expand and Expand Appearance. Expand Appearance is grayed out, but Expand is visible. Let's go ahead and click Expand. It's going to bring up a dialog box here. Expand Fill, Expand Stroke, that's the default. And yeah, I want to see the stroke and the fill. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And what that did is you'll see on the shape here, I now have vector for the outline. And so now if I were to do, say, divide, I have all of these different shapes where the stroke was is visible. I'm going to undo that. And there's another way to do that. So now I'm back to a regular stroke. If I click on this, you'll see I have a 21 points purplish stroke and a blue fill. You can also do this. You can also go to Object, and it'll give you a similar result as Expand, Object, Path, and Outline Stroke. And you'll see that did the same basic thing. It created vector outlines. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to do that with View Outline, Command Y. So you see there's my vector. I go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and this is one I use all the time, and you see what that did. Here's my stroke. My stroke's still there. The original vector is there, but I have basically a compound path here. The outline was made. If I offset this like I'm doing right now, let me hide my Pathfinder tool here. I'm going to go back to View, Preview, and you see what happens with that. This is a compound path that I've created here. And basically I have this star and I have a hole poked in it. So that's the Pathfinder tool. And also Object, Path, Offset, not offset path, but outline stroke and Object Expand. And those are super useful. And how does that relate to the assignment we're doing here? Well, I've got a guy's mouth here, and I also have glasses here. So I'm gonna draw this guy's. I'll duplicate the whole guy here. I'm just holding Option and Shift and dragging down. And let's say I want to do these glasses. So you can see my fill here. I've got some shapes that are just these white strokes. If I move them over here, you'll see, I'll move them on top of his face. You can see that's just that same shape with some white lines to be like the glare of his glasses. So I'm going to do that with, I'll get the rectangle tool here, and I'm just going to draw a line, and I'll make that be a regular square. I'll have that fill with just, I'll go no stroke, and I'll tell it to have a no stroke, and I'll tell it to have a white fill here. So there's my shape, white fill, no stroke, and I'll move this shape over his glasses, and I'll rotate it, and I'll duplicate it. And usually these would not be the same thickness, so I'll make one a little bit smaller. So I've got these overlapping shapes here, and I want to have them contour to just the inside shape of that. So what I'm going to do is I'll move these just down here out of the way of these glasses, and then I'll take the glasses themselves. Everything's grouped, so I'll ungroup. I'll have this shape here and duplicate it. And so you see it's on the top here as I move it forward on top of that shape. I'm gonna go to expand. So now I have the outline shape of it, and then I'll select all of these shapes here, and several of these would work, but I'll go to divide. That's going to work well. And what divide's going to do is I could have done minus, one of the shapes. Several of these would have worked, but I have just these guys selected here now. I'll get rid of this outer shape as well here. You can see those are all separate shapes now. And in the world of Adobe, there's always multiple ways to do many things. So let me see if these are grouped. Yeah, so I've got these guys here. You can see that shape, and I'll align them. And then I'll go to transparency here, and I'll tell it to be a lower opacity. So I'll go to like 20, 50, 40% opacity. And there you go, a nice glare for the glasses. I built this mouth the same way. You see the tongue there, that used to be just be a circle. The shape here started as a circle. I overlapped another circle and just did minus front and that, or a crop, either one will do it. And so that's the Pathfinder tool, the basic drawing tools for this one. And basically, most of the work you need to do on this project, you can do right here in this tool and the Pathfinder tool.